I'm going to give us some definitions of product marketing and product management, because this is not an overview of what the positions are, but really just talking about your careers and how to get to the top in product marketing and product management. So to begin with, I'm going to start with sort of the continuum from product launch from product concept through to product launch. And I'm going to start with strategy. And there is a strategic part of it. I'm not going to assign that to product marketing or product management, but somebody's going to come up with the idea. It might be in a business plan or a marketing requirements document, but it starts with the strategy. The next part continues to inbound product management. And this is everything from gathering the customer requirements, putting them into a product requirements document, might be known as a PRD. It might include functional specs, very detailed. It includes working with engineers. It includes documentation, testing, QA, beta customers, up to ultimately launch. There might be some other activities because product managers are always a very busy person. The next part on the continuum is really the outbound product marketing. And you notice I said inbound product management, outbound product marketing. On the outbound side, we talk about all of the messaging and positioning. And on the outbound side, we're talking about how you deliver the messages to your customer. Maybe it's a segmentation and how you target them. It's all of the marketing collateral, the sales training. It might include analyst briefings. It's all of the PowerPoints, web content, seminars, trade shows, all of the content behind the product and how you reach your audience with that content. And so I just wanted to kind of lay that terminology definition. There's a couple things I didn't note, and that is pricing. That might be determined by sales, so I'm not putting it in product marketing or product management. And I kept strategy out also because you could define it in other places. And I just wanted to throw out those definitions, and I know our panelists might add to them, but we'll hear more from them about the backgrounds, the skill sets. And I thought this would lay a framework for us to discuss it. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Deborah Henkin, who is going to be our moderator for this evening. Deborah?
Hello, it's a pleasure to have you all here with us tonight. We're going to run the panel in a little bit of a different way in order to add some variety. Not every panelist is going to answer each question, but panelists, if there is something you want to add that has not been, yes, press your magic button and I will call on you, and you can then get in whatever you need to. I also understand from the panelists that some of them don't believe this definition of product management and marketing is quite scientific, so I'm sure we'll be hearing from some of you. What I'd like to do right now is to ask each member of the panel to give a brief background of where they've been and how they have gotten to where they are today. So we'll start with Rich over at the end.
Thanks. In the briefest possible, I were an engineer, and I aren't one now. Spent a couple of years at HP writing code in the early 80s. That was about the time that electricity was invented. Came back here to the business school to do an MBA and have been doing more or less product management for technology products since about 87. 10 years of that with big companies, Tandem, Sybase, the next 10 years with startups. So 4 startups, 3 of which you've never heard of. The one called iPass did go public in 2003, and that included 2 years of consulting, which is liberally defined as I didn't have a startup to work for 2 years, and so I was a consultant. It started a newsletter that some of you may have seen on product management and startups.
Great, thanks. My name is Rita Iorfida, and I've been in the software industry for about 20-odd years. Variety of different roles. Actually, my experience has been probably more field-based to begin with. I worked at Dun & Bradstreet Software a long time ago. That was pre-ERP days, actually, and spent time there doing professional services, engagement management, and then went on to work for PeopleSoft for 9 years, mainly in the field field, doing customer service work, account management, professional services, business development, and then finally landed as head of financial product strategy. And certainly I have a different point of view coming from a large company in terms of what large companies do in terms of how they define product management and product strategy. I'm now with a startup company, and it's very different there, so I can tell you about the transition from going from large to small. But there they define products, product strategy, or products really as product strategy, product management, and product marketing. And I'm very happy that product marketing is part of that threesome.
Great. Thank you. Hi, my name is Tiffany Riley. I got sucked into the vortex that is the Silicon Valley about 12 years ago. Actually, my background was more on the sciences and biology, and thought, well, I'll go do something different for a while. So I think the main thing there is that no matter where you came from, with the right set of skills that we'll talk about tonight, you can actually go pretty far in the valley here. I've been very fortunate to have experiences at a pretty broad set of companies. I started out my career at Sybase and really got a sense of big company marketing at a very unique time when it was trying to overcome a set of perceptions in the market. Started out in the marketing and customer programs side of thing, which really fostered my passion for customers, their needs, and what can we do to help solve customer needs. Transitioned to a company called Scopus, which was in the very early days of the CRM craze, one of the companies who actually got that market going. And so to be a part of making a market was a fantastic experience, both from a product standpoint as well as a marketing standpoint. And then transitioned to a small company called Blue Pumpkin, which was in the call center space. So got to experience the world of funky names amongst a very rigid experience, and really got the experience there around making a brand for someone and really leveraging and understanding the world of creativity in software. I think that the software industry, I get into arguments with my friends in the consumer world about where you can be more creative, consumer or B2B, and I actually think there's a lot more creativity to be had in the B2B world. So my background through most of those was in the product marketing and product management, and at Blue Pumpkin took over the role of all of marketing at Blue Pumpkin, which was quite a jump to make, to go from focusing on the product to all of the different aspects, and just fell in love with not only focusing on the product, but also being able to look at how you bring that to market, and have taken that experience with me, and I'm VP of Marketing now at a company called Nextance.
My name is David Strauss. Like Rich, I started with HP some many years ago.
Fruit trees in Cupertino.
Exactly. And like Rich, started from an engineering point of view. I had a funky career path. I started with a double major in business and began engineering from there. And we can talk about how you get from one to the other. I think the key lesson that started then and has been, I guess, following me ever since, is that the path has never been what I expected it to be. In the engineering world, there was a very bright general manager who decided that I wasn't as good of an engineer as I probably was in some other role, and guided me very gingerly towards marketing and taking a product view of the world and a customer view of the world. Did 10 years at HP as a very large company. Didn't like the size of the company, really had more of an entrepreneurial spirit. Went to my first startup in the early 90s, have done multiple since then. Did a company called Open Vision Technologies, which we sold to Ritas. Did a little company in Atlanta. Some VCs kind of said, you want to come to Atlanta for a couple of years? My wife and I said, what the heck? Sold that one to Indus, started a company called On Demand. Wish I kept the website for that one, that we sold to Corticon Software in early 2002, and now at a company called Corticon, another early stage company in the business rules management space.
For the whole panel, what are the most important skills that an executive in product marketing and management needs? We'll start with Dave this time.
So it's interesting. I think the job description of product marketing and product management leads most of us in the wrong direction. And I've seen too many people focus on product as the center of the job. So I think the most important skills is customer. I think there are, in this role, there are two core constituencies: the people who will eventually buy the product and the people who sell the product to the people who buy the product. And those are my customers. And every time that I've seen a product marketing or management person worry about the product before the customer, I think they failed.
I would agree with that, and there's definitely a theme throughout as I was going through this, that the customer and know your market is absolutely important, no matter whether you're an individual contributor, product marketing or management person, or at the executive level. And I think a key part of that, especially in today's information age, is having a process for yourself to digest the tremendous amount of information that's going to come to you about your market, about your customers, what's going on in the sales organization, what's going on in the product organization, and you absolutely have to be able to maintain a discipline or you will go nuts trying to digest all of the information. And related to that, from an executive perspective, is having a team underneath you that you've hired well, and that you can keep them organized and prioritized. I think one of the toughest things about the job is that you sit in the middle of so many different pieces of the company. Everybody wants a piece of your time. And so a big part of the skills is being able to balance and manage the trade-offs between all of the different groups. And unless you really have your handle on what the company's main objectives are and what are the things that your team needs to do to line up to that, you'll never be able to have good discussions, and you'll never make anybody, whether it's your customers, salespeople, or engineering, happy.
It's always hard being the third one down, isn't it? Anyway, I think one of the most important skills, not only from an executive or just product management or product marketing, it's the skill of listening is one of the most important skills that you can learn, and you really have to start doing it very early in your career, because listening isn't just hearing; it's in fact understanding what the person is trying to tell you, and really delving into it. So it's not a skill that is particularly related to product marketing or product management, but it is a skill that I think is one of the most important ones that will make you successful or not successful. And to add to Tiffany's comments, I think that whole area of there's so much information out there that you have to be able to give yourself time to digest and really, really know what the market is out there. You can't go on just a sliver of information. You have to understand the entire piece of information that you have and then make the right decisions. So part of that decision-making process is around looking for the small things that are very, very creative in that extensive research that you end up doing. And some of those small things can be really huge things. And so I think learning when to do that is really important. And I also agree with Tiffany on the organizational aspects. Hiring the right people, getting the right people in the right seats on the right bus, if anybody's read Good to Great, is really important, because otherwise you won't be able to do the bigger job that you need to do.
Great. Of course, I'll agree with everybody. Let me come back to something that David said first. In the sort of line product manager job, one of the things I've seen over and over again is you turn out to need to be bilingual, which means you can speak customer and you can speak engineer. And by the way, the customers don't really care how the insides of the product work, and the engineers don't really understand what customers do. And so there's this constant need to go back and forth, be the simultaneous translator, and take things that customers say and put them in terms that engineers can implement, and then explain why the thing that came out the other end is what customers want. And one shouldn't confuse that with some document like an MRD, because half the people on each side didn't read it anyway. So there's that sense of participating on both sides. I think as you move up the organization, the key thing I've seen as an executive in the product role is that rather than having to worry about individual products, what you're really doing is you're watching for organizational breakages. Right? So you've seen the movie over and over again where support doesn't talk to engineering, and engineering ships something and support isn't trained. Right? Is that a product problem? Well, it is until you fix it. And so as the product executive, if you're responsible for customers having a great experience, what you're doing is you're watching the shape of the organization and all the motivators across all the different groups, trying to get all the children to play nicely and share the crayons. Because if the groups don't work well and none of them work for you, what comes out the other end is not good. And so you end up owning the process in the big sense, even if you're not allowed to tell anybody that, because of course everybody owns their own piece. The product management person or the product exec has to shepherd through the system, whatever it turns out to be, so the things that come out the end are good.
So all of you have been very successful, and we look at it as there are two sides of the skill. One is the product management and marketing side, and the other is the leadership, the ability to manage a team. So I'm going to ask Tiffany and Dave to talk about which of these many product management and marketing skills have been most useful as they've moved up, and then Rich and Rita about what leadership and management skills have been most useful to you. Tiffany, you want to start?
I think I'll dovetail off of what Rita said as one of the key things in terms of listening. And the role of both product marketing and product management is to translate what the customers or the market wants into a product or into a set of messages that will go to the market. And you need to be able to listen and understand what your current customers want and also what the market at large is looking for. And not just to understand it at a feature level, but to really understand what their needs are, what their success factors are as people, as an organization, what motivates the people that you're going to be selling your products to. And at the end of the day, you have to be the market expert in your company. And that just adds an extraordinary amount of credibility as you go to talk to the engineering organization. If they trust that you know the customers and that you're going to lead them into the right direction, they will follow you. The sales organization, no matter what the last 3 deals were, again, if they believe that you represent the market and you're going to show them the path to the success, they will follow you. And the same holds true from the executive and just a company perspective. And it's that credibility that really allows you to rally the troops around that. On a more tactical perspective, project management is just an absolutely critical skill because you touch so many different departments in the company. You have to be able to rally the troops not only with your credibility and your energy, but also with a sense of organization so that the little things that at the end of the day can turn into the big things don't fall through the cracks.
So again, I think there's a lot of agreement amongst the panel, and I agree with everything that Tiffany said. A couple additional items. You have to be outbound. So if you want to sit at your desk, if you don't want to get on an airplane, if you don't want to spend time with these people who are the customers, I think you can become a decent to mediocre product marketing and management person. And if you want to become really, really good, you have to be tied to the customer. You have to be really comfortable and like getting out there and having those interactions. I would tie to that you have to become sales focused in your mind. I mean, what's the objective of a product manager? It's to create a successful product that drives a lot of revenue. And being a salesperson is not an easy job. And you know, there's a ton of information, and there's features and functions and presentations, and I mean, salespeople don't necessarily consume all this information that all these wonderful marketing organizations have created. And if they don't gain what Tiffany suggested, which is confidence in you, then they will not have confidence in what you produce. And then they're going to start second guessing and producing their own slide decks and taking different cuts of the world. And then you end up with what I've seen in a lot of organizations, sales and marketing don't mix. Just like product management and engineering don't mix in a lot of companies because they don't find this common ground. So again, with outbound, if you're not prepared to spend, again, it depends on the company. If you're an ASP model, it may be a little bit different. But if you're not prepared to spend time with the field, out there fighting the battles and helping them win the battles and learning with them, you probably won't get that adoption of the field to you and therefore to your work product. And ultimately, if your work product isn't adopted, it doesn't matter how smart you are. I would say that you have to take a solution focus, not a product focus. Because in the end, people don't buy a product. They buy a solution to a problem, and so if there aren't the other things around, and I've seen too many organizations where the product manager worries about the feature functions that engineering produces and doesn't worry whether there's training or whether there's a support structure or all the other things that's necessary to make the product work, you can produce a pretty ineffective product in the market. And then the other thing that I would say is you have to kind of be bipolar to be a good product marketing and management person. On one side, you have to have the optimism and enthusiasm and belief in your product. I mean, you have to be an evangelist. You have to know and be able to reflect that positive nature. At the same time, when I've seen people do that without the other side of the skill, which is kind of being brutally honest or very, very critical, then you end up starting to believe your own marketing. And there's nothing worse, because our job is to continually test. Because if it was that formulaic, if we knew how to analytically assess exactly the right product in the right way, there'd be a lot more successful companies out there, right? A lot of this is just judgment. And so if you're not out there saying, okay, we said this, like, is it right? Are people believing it? Can we really get adoption on this vector? If you're not being more brutal about what you're saying in the privacy of your own office with your peers, then, you will probably get a little bit off track.
Rich, Rita, let's talk about leadership and management skills.
Sure. Again, just, touching on a couple things we said before, I think at the management level, at the executive level, I think it's important to foster the sort of shared belief that getting to the right answer is more important than whose answer it is. That, so you could call that the mediator or the moderator role. Those of us who did the GSB thing would say it's a little taste of touchy-feely. But, if you're the point of intersection, if you're the glue that holds the organization together, what's really important is that everybody believes they're the reason why something's successful. And so there's a lot of pulling people together to do the things that they were supposed to do anyway, but just sort of haven't gotten around to doing. And it seems like the product management spot is the one where you see all the holes and you try to fill them, and then you try to give them back to the people who own them. And in order to do that, you've got to both be and be perceived as somebody who's not around ego gratification or grinding your own axe. It's about what's right for everybody.
If I may add,
Sure.
Without it becoming a committee decision.
Oh yeah, so you already know the right answer. You just got to get everybody there, but you can't let them know, right? The right answer is completely obvious to everybody who doesn't work at that company, but I can tell you that standing up on the table and beating your chest and saying I'm right and I'm smarter is, well, it's a really long way from that to the next promotion.
I guess when I look at the leadership management skills that that were important to me as I moved up, it was really recognizing that I didn't have to do everything, and so it's easy when you're a product manager to think that you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. But as you grow up, as you go up through the chain and start to have people that work for you, the most important thing that you can learn is to let go, and the most important thing to do is to foster that, in fact, that those people that work for you are the ones that are probably going to have the details that you used to think and hold closely to your heart. And until you can let go of some of those details, you can't start doing the things that you really need to do from a management point of view. And if there was one particular thing that I had to learn over and over again, is to let go of those details that I so loved. And especially when you're in the software industry and you get so enamored of sitting down and talking about the best way to do XYZ, whatever it is, I think the most important thing is to learn to let go and then to trust the people that you've hired for the jobs and to bring them along, because they will make you successful if you've hired the right people. So to me, that was one of the most important things that I certainly learned along the way. And then the other thing that I learned is that as a as a person that in fact has a certain level of experience, there's, as Tiffany said, there's a certain amount of credibility that you gain in an organization. And once you've gained that credibility, what you have to be really careful of is not to lose it, and to continue to foster that credibility, because that will make you successful. That will make you successful not only in terms of your peers, but the people that you report to. So I think those are the two, if I look at leadership management skills that I've learned along the way, that have been very important to me.
So you talked about how you have to have a team, so this leads into our next question, which is, what advice do you give your team to be successful? You've all been successful, but how do you make your team successful? And we'll have Tiffany and Rich answer that one.
This is one of my favorite ones. I'm sure people are rolling over in their graves right now. I think we've beat this one to death, and I will beat it again because it's fun. Number one is absolutely know your market and know your customers. And not from a feature function perspective, but to live and breathe the world of so what, who cares, and why. And if you work with a good salesperson, they will come back at you constantly with those questions. And so if you can live and breathe those as you go out and talk to the market and talk to the customers and think about why you want to build certain product and why you want to market product in certain ways, that will help make you extremely successful. And as a part of that, using examples. I think it's very easy in our jobs to live at a 10,000-foot level. And when you're out there talking to a customer or talking with a salesperson or an analyst, one of the most powerful things that you can use are examples of things that you've learned, either what customers are doing with your products, the business problems that they have, to get those heads nodding in the audience that you understand the customer's world, no matter who you're talking to, so that they feel that credibility, and they're going to be more apt to buy your products from you. And that kind of relates to the next thing, which is I always encourage my people to think from the other side of the table. As you're putting pricing together, think about what a rep is going to want to know and have to explain to the customer about why you've chosen to package or price things in a certain way. As you're negotiating features with engineering, think about from their perspective that they're trying to figure out how do we build all of these different pieces. And so as you explain to them what the customer requirements are, come at it from that angle. As you're dealing with executives, they're working with way too much information. They need to know things very succinctly, very precisely, and at just the right level. And so as you work with all of those different groups, think about it from their perspective and leverage all of the great ideas. Rich mentioned this, and I just think that is one of the most important things. Don't feel that you have to have all the answers yourself. There are really smart people around you, and some of the best ideas come from the most bizarre places in the organization, and listen to those. I think it's easy for us to put engineers in a box, and I've been very fortunate to work with engineers who have actually had some of the best marketing ideas that are out there because they're not inhibited by the same things that we're inhibited of what we can and can't do. And I think that's a very powerful thing to take advantage of. And the last thing is you can't, as a product manager or product marketer, take things on a one-off basis. Sales has a request. So what? A customer wants a certain feature. You have to constantly take things into context, and I had a long conversation about this with somebody earlier, that if a customer comes to you with a feature request, go back to them with the other 15 things that they've asked you for and talk to them about how important this one thing is relative to everything else. Salesperson comes to you and they want that new data sheet on whatever it is. Here's the other 20 things that you've asked me for. Where does this fall in the relative set of priorities? It makes the relationship go much better. It shows that you're listening, and also make sure that what you deliver at the end of the day are the most important things to your company and to your customers. As you can see, I'm very passionate about this.
Great. Thanks. Just a couple other thoughts. One is I think it's natural for somebody who's just starting out, particularly on the product management side, to believe that completing a document is an important step in life. And that everything that went into that MRD was work, but gosh, I finished it, I published it, I emailed it to everybody, we printed it, now let's go have a drink, right? And I think that sort of misses the ebb and flow of, well, it's really an ongoing negotiation, right? Because everything you put in there, you're not going to get it all, and next week you're going to be back trying to figure out which of the 20 things you're going to have to drop anyway. So if you don't get as emotionally invested in little point pieces and you stay focused on the overall trend toward a product, I think that's healthy. The other thing that my folks and I have done a few times, and forgive me for a second, I'm a parent, and for those of us in the audience who are parents, any analogy with how, for instance, salespeople think, completely accidental. But on those one-off things, we always try to play the game to say, your kid wants dessert before dinner tonight, but she promises that tomorrow night she'll eat dinner in the right order, right? Anybody who has a kid knows that you're either in it or you're out of it. The special discount, we really only want it once, and it's end of quarter, and it's a special deal, right? Okay, so we're going to go in the room and close the door, and the product folks are going to talk about what happens next week when we say yes to the sales rep in the Northeast who promises he's never going to tell anybody else that he got this special discount for his customer. Okay? What are the implications? Let's play the game forward a few steps. What happens if we derail all of engineering to do this one feature for this one customer that we're actually not sure we're going to close? Okay? What are the implications 2 steps down, 4 steps down? Because that's how the product team gets smart about explaining why they're making choices. And they get more confident because the next time they're in a tough situation, they're going to have some visceral basis for how good decisions get made, because we've all sat around in the privacy of our own little conference room to talk about how bad decisions get made and what they look like.
That's great. Let's change a little bit our track. We're going to talk about mentors a little bit. What we'd like to know, and I'll ask Rita and Dave this, is have you had mentors or a role model? When did you get one? And I'm going to add the question, how did you get one? How did you get somebody to agree to be your mentor or your role model? Rita, go ahead.
I guess the mentor that I think I relied mostly on is I had a mentor in the sales organization that taught me everything that I really needed to know from a sales methodology point of view, and also taught me a lot about positioning and product positioning, and that person was very instrumental in my understanding of how product marketing fits within the sales organization, how important it is to them to give them the right set of tools that they need to go out and market the products that I so love to build at the time. So that salesperson was one of the best salespersons I've ever seen in my whole life. I mean, sell a general ledger product for $9 million to a company is like, it's pretty big. And she was just awesome. She taught me everything that I know, both from a presence and credibility point of view, and just how important it is to have the right product positioning, the right sales tools, so that these guys can go out and sell and make a lot of money. So that was early in my life. That was I was in, and actually I wasn't even in a product marketing role at the time. I was in a business development role, and she taught me a lot about what I needed to know going forward.
How did you find her, or how did you make that connection?
She was in the field organization that I was working at the time in PeopleSoft, and she was just a crackerjack. I mean, I just really glommed onto her. I just followed her everywhere for a while and learned everything that I needed to know from that sales point of view, and that helped me tremendously.
Okay, Dave, what about you? Did you have somebody as well?
So the answer is yes, and many. This is to kind of an interesting point that Tiffany made, which is you get some great ideas from some areas you wouldn't have expected. I had an early mentor when I was at HP. He was a general manager in the division, and the thing that he told me was that I should learn from others' mistakes. He said, and I have a friend who, was very successful in his career, and he says, you know what, I can't learn if I don't make the mistake myself, right? I have to go in there and try it and butt my head against the wall, and, 3 boards later he realizes, gosh, board members don't actually want the truth. There's a shock. Doug really taught me that everyone around you is a learning experience. And I've had mentors at many different levels. There was a guy who was kind of a rising star at HP, and I knew him when I was there, and we maintained a relationship. There was, I would say, more personal. And then he became an investor in my startup and sat on the board, and some of these relationships have lasted years, some of these relationships have lasted months. But I think if you have some value to add to somebody, right, if there's a reason for them to spend time with you in terms of their world, and you're willing to listen to them, which I think is key, and we've talked about that as product marketing people and as product management people, right? You have to listen. I think there's just a tremendous amount of mentorship that you can get from places you can't even imagine, and from people who don't even know that they're mentoring you. So you really have to stay open and look for that value. I think in a very, very small way, some of you may be here because you're looking for a little bit of that, just in 1 hour's worth of discussion from the four of us.
What about Tiffany or Rich? Would you like to comment? Have you had role models? What have you learned?
Let's see. I'd say for the first half of my career, I was oblivious enough to the whole question that I probably did and missed out. I mean, I missed out on all the opportunities because I was being really smart, and nobody else was as smart as I was. And later on, I think, a good shovelful of humility was really necessary to get to listen to smart people. A guy named David Thompson I worked for at iPass, really, really smart, wonderful guy. And what he told me and then he taught me was executives get paid to make decisions and to keep organizations running, and everything else is busy work. And so if you spent your whole day, sitting with the engineers, figuring out how to do something more elegantly, that's fine, but maybe you didn't earn your money today. And that's putting it harshly, but, just the point everybody's made, you actually have to pay attention because people are out there waiting and willing to help you if you'll just give them the time to let them help you.
Yeah. And I think, too, a lot of the mentors that I've had have actually, some of them have been in the marketing area, but a lot of them have been in other areas. And so I would definitely encourage you to look for leadership in areas where you don't necessarily have a full set of skills. And as Rich said, people are willing to help. They love to share the knowledge that they have. And so don't assume that just because you're in a different department that somebody doesn't necessarily want to help you. And that's been incredibly powerful throughout my career.
So, Rich, you mentioned one mistake you made was thinking you were too smart. That leads us to our next question. Tiffany and Rich, what mistakes are most common for product marketer and management people to make?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'll take whatever you leave.
Rich said he'd take whatever she forgot.
That's right. Well, I felt like answering this question to some degree was a laundry list of things I've done wrong at some point or another. I think a couple of things. It's a really, really challenging role, and I think that's one of the things that makes it such a fun challenge for really smart people, and why you see such a great group of people who are in the product marketing, product management profession. One of the things that I see a lot, and I still struggle with this on a day-to-day basis, is it's really easy to get sucked into the Tasmanian devil that is sales. And while we've talked a lot here about you need to be sales focused, you need to walk in the same set of shoes, you can't let them rule and drive your life. The product marketing and product management function can be a wonderful grounding function or a traffic cop for the company. And I think if you get too caught up in one department's perspective, particularly sales, A, it'll drive you crazy, and B, it'll lead you to make some decisions for your company, for your solutions that may not be the best solutions. The flip side of that, however, is that too often I see product managers or product marketers who are not aggressive enough. I think it's really easy to get caught up into the world of I can't or I don't have time instead of thinking, how can I? even if it's a matter of making trade-offs or doing things differently or doing things 80% instead of 100%. As things come to your table, the first reaction shouldn't be to freak out and, oh my God, I can't do that. I already have 100 things else that I need to get done either on a sales or on a product perspective. And so think about how you can be aggressive, whether it's from a vision standpoint, whether it's from a workload standpoint, or pushing the organization around you to help you get done what you need. And as a part of that, the last thing that I'll touch on is that being in product marketing and product management, it's an incredibly important role that is getting a lot of attention in companies. Companies are investing a tremendous amount in that organization and function because they recognize how important it is. Just because you have that title on your business card does not get you the get-out-of-jail-free card in terms of a lot of things that we've talked about already. The credibility. Engineering isn't just going to tell you to do things because you wrote a really nice MRD with some really cool screenshots. Sales isn't going to do what you tell them to do because you can make really nice graphics in PowerPoint. You have to be able to work within those organizations, think like they think, stand up beside them when the times are tough, and they'll know that they can trust you and they'll be willing to work with you.
Good. Thanks. One other thing I think I've seen over and over again, I've done it, and maybe a bunch of folks in the room here have done it. Your first time out, you're sitting with a customer who's really tough and really big and really important and demands that you commit to the feature they need, right? Okay, I never did. And the sales rep looks over at you and the customer looks over at you and your plane doesn't leave for 4 more hours to go back to headquarters. And, out of your mouth comes the blurted sentence says, we can get that to you by Q2, right? Which engineering didn't commit to, right? You've just committed, you've broken rule number 1, which is you made a commitment without the organization behind you. And I think that's a sort of symptomatic of not having a long enough view horizon. And so if you're at this company for any length of time, you're going to be sitting with that customer next quarter and next year and 2 years from now. And the thing they really need from you more than anything else is for you to be, an honest broker here and to say, I'll go back, I'll work hard, I'll try to get that for you. But when we sit down again next quarter or at the user group meeting, right, you will know that I speak for the organization because I've got a long-term view. That I'm the honest broker, I'm the honorable person here who, I may fudge a little bit, but I won't lie. And I think it's really hard as a product manager to go out in the field and not say the thing the customer wants you to say, especially if it's not true. And then to go back, of course, and deny that you said it. But
Rita, do you have an example of a mistake you made that you learned the most from?
Yes. We've been talking a lot about, we talked a lot about the difference between inbound and outbound. And, in a natural time frame within an organization, there is a different emphasis on inbound versus outbound. And one of the earlier mistakes that I made was not recognizing when the pendulum was swinging to more outbound or to more inbound than outbound. And if you happen to like something more than one or the, if you like me that likes the outbound piece much more than the inbound piece, if you don't recognize that the pendulum is swinging to inbound, that there's, the organization is suddenly switching to being much more focused internally in the relationship that product management has with, say, engineering, then you can really people will start to think that you're not cooperating in that sort of thing. And to me, I learned that all too painfully, that you do have to recognize that sometimes there is greater emphasis on one than the other, and that you have to be able to shift.
What about you, Tiffany?
I've made many. I think one of the ones that sticks out the most in my mind is, and maybe this is a common theme of some of the mistakes that I've made in general, is not trusting my instincts. And whether that's from a product perspective, getting pushed either by development to do things the way that development wants instead of really standing up for the customer and saying, no, will make much more sense from what the customer is looking for. At the end of the day, it's the customers who have to use those products. And I guess it's the flip side of what Rich said, which when you're in front of the engineers, and you're making trade-offs and negotiations, it's easy to get sucked into this is the easier way to do things. And I really regretted it later as we started to get into the phases where we had to go show customers, well, here's what we're building, and you kind of see the look on their faces and you start to shrink behind the table. So trust your instincts as far as knowing what the customers want and what's the best thing for them.
I think Dave has one too.
Yeah, I mean, adding to this theme that we've talked about is, I think a big lesson for me, and it took me years, is to realize that products don't matter. They are a means to an end. And every time that I've seen people, I've heard product manager, oh God, we've got this feature and it just kicks butt on our competitor's feature, right? They can't do this. And the fact is that when customers are buying, and again, you've probably heard this, don't confuse selling with implementation. Okay? I mean, customers, this is not true across all markets, but they don't always know exactly what it is they want. It's surprising. Sometimes they get an RFP from some industry analyst who, in fact, may not really understand the market that they're reviewing. And, do you have one of these, and do you have one of these? And you get caught up in, when customers are buying products, to them, red and orange are the same color, okay? They are not willing to invest at the level of knowledge that you have understanding your products in the market. I mean, you have to do this great job of understanding, but then you can't fool yourself into thinking that anyone that you're selling to has gone through the same exercise or understands a unique value proposition. Huge lesson is when I realize, and now I've luckily been able to teach this lesson to others, that sometimes you put things in your product not because they're good for the product, but because they're good for the sales process. Because ultimately, if you believe that your solution will truly solve the customer's problem once they acquire it, our job is to make sure they do acquire it. I have been associated with companies who produced tremendously good products and failed. So learning what product we're really producing is, I think, the key lesson that I had to learn over years, and it's not the product. It's the successful result in both selling and implementation.
Rich and Dave, what would you have done differently in your career, looking back now, that might help members of the audience?
Go ahead.
Well, this one's easy. The first thing I would have done is in '93, I would have taken the job at Netscape. The second thing I would have done is in '96, I wouldn't have started my own company. I would have taken the job at BEA. It's a very hard question to answer, kind of, revisionist history. I've made a lot of mistakes. I think that that's okay. If I ever work for a manager who thinks mistakes are bad, then for me, I think I'm working for the wrong executive. Because, marketing and everything we do in high tech, there's formula to marketing. There's a certain set of things that I think it's very formulaic, but the implementation of that formula is very unique, and you have to experiment and try. So, the thing that I learned, and I wish I would have learned sooner, is to feel okay making mistakes, to acknowledge making mistakes. One piece of advice I got from an old HP manager is, and it took me a little while to fully internalize it, it's okay to make mistakes. You have to learn to correct them quickly, to acknowledge them and correct them quickly. If you make mistakes and you try to perpetuate them, not to expose yourself, you're really toast.
Sure.
That's so true, actually.
Yeah.
I can't, absolutely.
Right.
One of the hardest lessons to learn is to say, yes, I'm wrong.
Own it and fix it,
move on,
and move on and try not to do it again. A couple things come to mind for me. I've been on a few products that were canceled before their time. So you're the product manager on a product or a project it's just not happening now. Whether it's not a great product or the politics or whatever, if you've ever been on something for a year or 2 or 3, and you've had it canceled, that's an emotional loss, right? That's a member of your family. That's something you've put your heart and soul into. You need to give yourself a little time to acknowledge that, but it's not necessarily a reason to walk out of the company that you work at, right? So on the one hand, we throw ourselves emotionally into the thing we do every day. We try to nurture and push along our products. Sometimes they don't work, and it's really important, I think, to separate out I'm angry and hurt because they correctly canceled the product, which ain't going to sell, or I'm angry and hurt because they canceled a great product and I hate my management and it's time to walk out the door. And those may feel the same, but the results are different. So, you bring your heart into work every day, but you need to...
Well, what Rich is saying, when I see a product manager who says, this dog ain't going to hunt, right? I'm usually pretty impressed, even if they're wrong.
Right.
You've really got to be able to, as a product manager, look at that product and say, I've invested the last 6 months, and you know what? The market isn't there, or we can't be successful against the competition, right? That's a huge
really
value.
Hard. It's really hard because I think, as you had said, when you're talking to customers in the sales force, everything about your product is wonderful, right? It is the greatest thing since, you choose it sliced bread. But in your heart, you need to know how much of that's true. And maybe you don't tell anybody else but the folks in product management, but you better know and you better be right, because when it's all over, you need to have done the right thing.
Dave and Rita, what advice would you give someone just starting out in product management in order to be successful?
Go into engineering.
What was that?
Go into engineering.
Don't go into engineering. My advice to them is to, and I've said this to, it's 3 words: network, 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 because you're going to need help and you're going to need advice. And so really start to build your network early on in your career. And I think that's really important. And also understand when, within your own organization, don't be afraid to go to your manager and say you don't know what you're doing. Because that's what they're there for. They are there to help you. So those are 2 things that I think are important. And then the other thing, as Dave said, is don't be afraid to say that you made a mistake. I think that is so important because you can move on. People admire honesty, believe it or not, and so you got to.
If you whack it against the wall,
GSM buzz. So, what would I add to that? Ultimately, many of you may want to be VPs of marketing, whether product management, product marketing, or overall marketing. I would say that, to do that, you have to have walked a mile in a lot of different roles. But to be successful, I think you have to get pretty skilled at any particular role, at a given role. You have to learn how to do a product manager's job well, or a product marketing person's job well, or to deal with the analyst well. And when you build it up, I think you can be a very good generalist. But I don't think you can be a generalist just because you've done a survey. You've done one job and kind of surveyed everything. The other piece of advice that I'd give, and I think this is controversial, and a lot of people, my peers may say, it's not necessary, but I think you need to learn how to sell. I think if you can walk a mile literally in the shoes of a salesperson, if you haven't had to go through the process of convincing someone to buy, your product, you think it's easy. I mean, that's one of the beauties of being, sitting home and watching the Super Bowl, right? Oh my God, I can't believe they made that call. It's really, one of the things I've learned over the years is every function, so it surprised me, every function in the company is really hard. I mean, it's really hard to be a good salesperson. It's really hard to be a good engineer. It's really hard to be a good product manager. And our work product goes through sales. And if you don't understand why they're coming to you and asking for the slide du jour, that's a symptom of something, right? And until you've been in that role, understanding they don't get it. you haven't made it easy for them to describe the value to the customer. So they're looking to patch holes and symptoms and talk about features, and they're all over the place. So I think any way that you can learn through mentorship or through practice to really understand the sales role, you will be a superior product manager. And I have a lot of respect. Anyone here from, currently or formerly from Siebel? Okay. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the organization that Dave Schmeier put in place and for how he affected marketing. Because that was a group of people who understood what the result was, and that was revenue. And I think there were some mistakes made in beginning to believe and not continually assuming something, which is that my differentiation, if it is differentiation, it's no longer valid. I think people hang their hat on what they have done and say, gosh, we're the best, we've got this unique patented technology, it differentiates from our competition. Believe me, the minute you have that in the market, it's being eroded by press releases, by other salespeople saying, oh, we're producing that. So you have to continually refresh and continually stay ahead of the market. But I think the Siebel organization really was an organization, and still is an organization, that puts the customer out there and the salesperson out there.
Rich and Tiffany, for those who are already a product manager, maybe in the middle of their careers, what advice can you give them about preparing to move up?
Okay, I'll go first. Sorry. So I just come back to something that Rita had said about networking. Some of the groups in your company never get talked to and feel really lonely and know lots of really cool stuff. I'm thinking of people like the customer support organization and the QA team, right? Nobody ever talks to them, and they're off in a corner, and they're really lonely, and some of them are really good and smart. Some of the best help I've ever gotten, has been from peers in organizations that are usually ignored. And, not just, sales, of course, is out there, but there are people out there trying to do their hardest every day, and they don't really know where they fit. And if you can help them fit into the process and understand where their work is valuable and also learn from them, I think you've built both skills and a network that are the things that move you up.
I think I'm also going to touch on something Rita said earlier. I think making the move from an individual product manager or product marketer to that first level of management is actually a lot harder than making the move from there to being a group product manager and there to being a VP of product marketing or product management. And letting go is something that is absolutely important. And I am a diehard product manager. I lived and breathed the details of who my customers were and how they were using the product and what was in the product. And it's incredibly hard to let that go. And I think one of the things that you can do to be the most successful in letting go and doing that is listen to the questions that the people that you respect ask you. Listen to what your VP of sales or your best salesperson asks you when you go through a pitch with them. Listen to the hard questions that a really good engineer asks you when you're trying to convince them of a certain set of things that you want to do in the product. Listen to what the executive team asks you when you go give a launch presentation or you go give a product presentation or a competitive review. Listen to the things that they ask you, and those are the questions that you want to start asking of yourself and asking of your team. And what you'll start finding is that you can actually get the information that you need to be comfortable, that you can go do your job, that you can lead your team without having to understand every bit and byte of information yourself. I mean, it's something that I still struggle with to this day, that I have to remind myself constantly of. And as a part of that, it's really about using your people. Another thing that Rita said, which I thought is incredibly important, is that you don't have to have all the answers yourself. And I think that's another just kind of inherent trait that a lot of us have because of who we are, that you feel that you want to have the answers yourself. Use your people. Get them involved. If you can learn how to make them successful, they will make you successful, and that will carry with you no matter how many people you have working underneath you.
Great. In just a minute, we're going to have Katherine come up to talk about what she looks for when she's recruiting for candidates. I'd just like to ask Dave and Rita what they look for when they're interviewing people to work on their teams.
Since I've just gone through this with Kathy, she can correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, what I look for in terms of product management, product marketing is there's some personal characteristics that I think are important, and they can be equally as important as what I would call job experience. So on the job experience side, I look for somebody that has, and obviously it depends on where your organization is in terms of maturity and that sort of thing, but I look for somebody that has some sort of product life cycle knowledge, experience in terms of the process around how do you get from the distillation of what that product is all the way through to launch. They have to understand what that process is, and certainly I look for that. I look for domain expertise, and that may mean domain expertise in a particular area. So, if I'm working in financial systems and I'm looking for a product manager, then ideally what I want is somebody that has a financial systems background or an enterprise systems background. I think you look for, on the personal side, you look for people that have a sense of confidence. They're sitting in front of you, not fidgeting, doing all that sort of stuff, but somebody that has confidence, because it's so important for a product manager to have a presence when they are talking to, whether it be engineering, whether it be sales. They have to be credible. There is no way that you won't be successful if you are not. And then I look for that inherent quality, clear communication, also important. But I also look for energy and passion. I don't want somebody that is just going to sit back and just write an MRD. I want somebody that is clearly energetic and passionate about the field that they're in.
Agree with all of that. Obvious additions, common theme for me, customer focused, right? If they don't think and talk in those terms, they're probably the wrong person for my organization. I think the key thing that I look for is judgment. I always try to hire experience, but the world that we live in isn't a set of spreadsheets in which you can calculate the right answer. I wish it were. It would make my job a lot easier. So what's really interesting is that with all the market research you do, with all the customer analysis you do, with this just tremendous amount of facts, for me, the difference between the great product marketing and management people I've worked for and the not so great is their ability to intuit. Is for their ability to integrate under the curve all of these complex things. And when I see that judgment, when I see that they're able to assess all this stuff and kind of put it together, then I think I found someone who's probably right for my organization.
Great. One more question for the panelists, and then we'll open it up to questions after Kathy gives her take on what she looks for. One thing, guys, just one thing. What's your key to your success? Start with Rich. One major thing.
Well, there was a big assumption, wasn't there?
You seem to have been successful. What's the key to your success?
You work hard, you throw your heart into it every day. Pass, I don't know.
I have to go back. I'm an excellent listener, and I think that has really stood me in great stead.
Tiffany.
I think passion.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Dave?
Success as defined in being successful as a marketer or being successful in a career, which I think are two different things. So I'll take a different point of view from being successful in a marketer. To be successful in a career, I think don't stay in any one place too long. I've seen people who, there's this thing I call the kind of father-son syndrome. You grow up and you get to a point and your dad's looking for advice and he doesn't look to you because he sees you as a 13-year-old or a 12-year-old or an 8-year-old. And it takes like 10 more years, but in your work relationships, you're learning. So the day you come in and you're learning often sets the framework for how people see you 3 years from now, even though you are a new person. And so, every now and again, you need to have a fresh perspective. You need to leverage. It's like buying houses. You know, you get a certain value, then you buy a bigger house because you've got equity in that, and you leverage that. And so in terms of your career, if you stay stagnant, you stay in one place too long, you will probably lose a lot of the value that you've created.
Great answers. Okay, now we'll have Katherine come up to tell you her perspective on getting a job in product management.
So I think we have the expert sitting next to me, and so in putting together my answer, I'm actually using a lot of what I heard tonight. I actually put it together beforehand, but a lot of it is common. So I'm going to use some of the words we heard today. First of all, as an executive recruiter looking for product marketing management positions, it's sort of a given that they've got the product marketing, product management skills. If they don't have that, I don't need to waste the time talking to them. So I look for the personal characteristics. And we heard them tonight. Number one is customer focus. When I'm asking you about how did you come up with the product or messaging, I need to hear, I went out and talked to customers. I gathered the requirements by talking to customers. I met with the analysts and learned this. I met with my salespeople and learned this. It's all about knowing the market, the customers. I mean, we couldn't have heard this more loudly than the panelists brought up tonight. Second around that, David, since I worked in product marketing at Siebel, it's the sales focus and outbound. You better know how to sell. Product marketing is out there sharing the confidence in the product and where the product direction is going, so you need to be credible as a salesperson, giving the confidence around the product line. Around other personal characteristic, I'll just call it team. It's the team management. It's the credibility that we talked about, being able to rally that cross-functional team that you have no control over managing, having the product management skills to manage that team. So a lot of those kind of personal characteristics. And the last part is that I look for then is the experience, the job experience. And as I've been working on searches over the last year, not last year, every time I look at it, people hire me to do the difficult searches. So they're not looking just for product marketing, product management, but it gets into deep experience around some sort of technology or some sort of industry focus. So around technology, Ritas was in tax. With David, I needed industry, he's been a customer too, so I needed people with experience in credit card processing, back office, mortgage industry, and it was very, very specific within financial services. Other things like on technology, business activity monitoring within business analytics, or the marriage of employee performance with business analytics. So you can see how I'm splitting hairs on very specifics. And then sometimes they throw in the technology plus the industry experience. Right now I need small and medium business focused people in enterprise software. So you end up getting a lot of different combinations as I'm looking for it. So I think that it comes back to the personal characteristics and the job experience. Now it's time to turn this over to all of you so you can ask questions to our panelists. So back there?
Yeah. I guess being in Silicon Valley, one of the craziest thing is people ask for 10 years of experience in a technology that's only been out for 2. So, I mean, isn't that kind of aren't you looking for more of those personal characteristics than actually the technical or business areas?
Sure. I remember when Java was only out 2 years, and right, and you wanted somebody with 10 years of Java, but it didn't exist. I think often the common theme is, tell me why the things you've done line up with the things I need. So, we called it middleware for a while, and then we called it plumbing for a while, and then we called it, connectivity for a while, but it's all the same junk in the middle, right? So, you've got to make the case why you really do understand the things they need, even if, you learned code before C++ had the pluses on it.
Anyone else? Other questions? Right back there.
Yeah, you guys talked a little bit about it being important to have a sales set of skills to understand what they're doing. How much do you think it's important to share the engineer's skill set? And how much of the product do you think you need to be able to make yourself in order to design it better?
I want to answer from an engineer and a non-engineer on this one.
May I?
Yes.
Okay, so I were an engineer. whenever you join a new group or a new company, there's a first meeting with some of the engineers where they're going to ask you a couple of what they think are softball technical questions, right? And if you get them wrong, you are forever written off as just another stupid MBA with a tie who doesn't know anything, right? So in my view, you need to have enough to appreciate what they do. You need to have a feel for the technology. You don't have to be as good as they are, and they don't want you to. But if you're really a lightweight, they know it.
So if you don't have an engineering background, how do you get the credibility with engineering? Or
Well, I think you need to study up, and you need to speak enough of their language. You don't have to be an engineer, but you have to be enough engineering-ish that, the antibodies don't trigger.
Yeah, I'm a non-engineer, and one of the first things that I did when I was in technology was I attached myself to an engineer and learned as much as I could right away, and that stood me in good stead my entire life, because I learned enough in terms of what I needed to know, and I just kept doing that. I would always I would always find out what I would need to know in order to be credible. So, but if your question is your question whether engineering gives you a stronger leg up to be a good product manager?
Yeah, I suppose. I worked as a product manager in an internet company, and I have an arts background. And if this is about getting to the top, how much of that background am I going to need to shore up, I guess, generally? Are there going to be deficiencies that I'm going to run into? Things like that.
I personally don't think there would be deficiencies as long as you start to gain enough knowledge that you're credible. I mean, I don't have an engineering background, and certainly that's what I did initially when I started out in the software industry. I basically attached myself to somebody that I could learn from, and I think if you do that, I think you'll be successful.
I have a lot of engineering in my background, and I think it's almost kind of. I put my, all my initials, and everyone's impressed with it. But the reality is, I was in engineering school 10 years ago, and almost nothing I learned then is something I know now. And the people that I think really know what's going on, the people who've read the books and stayed up with it. The fact that I've got these nice initials out, that kind of helps me out in credibility. But it's kind of a little joke to myself. And so I think that if you can speak the acronyms and read up on stuff and discipline yourself, you're probably better off than I am in reality.
There's another element, which is it's how you're doing your product management. So if you think product management is about solving the technical problem, then you're probably doing it wrong, and you do need to know the engineering. If you're very good at helping the engineers understand what the problem is, and you show them the respect and help them figure out how to solve the problem, not trying to be an engineer, but helping them in this huge bridging process between a problem, and that's where you have the credibility, and them, and really showing them respect because they're doing something hard, which is how to solve the problem, then I think you get a lot of credibility. And the other side of that is, I think part of our job as product managers is to change the frame of reference for the engineers. So it's not about engineering. Right? And I've got a great engineering team at my company. I love them because they constantly hammer me about the messages, about what we're communicating to the customers, and do we really understand, and how much money are we making, and what does this analyst say? They really, really care about whether their product is seeing the light of day and being successful. When I was with HP, I was in the engineering group, I was in an engineering management role, and what made my group different than all the other engineering teams in this division is we posted and tracked our revenue. And they loved it when their product was being sold, and they wanted to go talk to the customers and wanted to buy the product, what we do different, and it completely changed their frame of reference to, as an engineer, I've yet to meet an engineer who wants to produce a product that no one wants, or who wants to produce a product that's going to get shelved. So I think if you can bring them into the world of success, they're not going to care whether you actually know the difference between XML and, fill in the blank.
There's another question down here. Okay, how about here in front?
Sometimes it's true that products are successful. And the need for engineering is not to suppose. So Ed Culligan in Palm just recently made a statement which rang true for me in my career, and it was that if we just execute to plan and follow the roadmap that we created, we will be tremendously successful as a company. And for a high-tech company, there's a good bad. I'd like to hear your comments about that, about keeping people's creativity high when the situation requires executing much more than inventing.
Did everybody hear the question? How do you keep creativity high when execution's important?
Well, I think you're always in a situation where you're creating, and I think some of this depends on where a company is in its given life cycle, but I think there's always a sense of creativity and creation that goes into your roadmap, no matter whether you're capable of building a 12-month roadmap and sticking to it, although I've never seen that. And so I think within that you can keep people interested and excited with, it all goes back to the customer again. I mean, you're building that product to solve a problem, and that's the exciting part. And no matter how disciplined you are or how long it takes you to build that, or even if you're not constantly iterating your products and adding new features, the excitement comes from seeing the faces of your customers light up when you've solved a problem for them. And from an engineering perspective, I have to agree with Dave, there's nothing that gets them more excited than when they see that their product is going to make a difference for a customer. And nothing gets sales more excited than that as well. And that's how you keep everybody engaged in that process, even if you're more in an execution type of mode.
And I just say, I've never been lucky enough to work on a product that was so good that it actually met all of the customer's needs. There's almost always a tremendous amount left to do, and there's always more to do than you can get done, and the engineering team can get done. And it may sound good, but I've yet to run into that product that really is so good.
Yeah, and when I was at PeopleSoft and I headed up the product strategy organization for financials, I mean, by the time I took that on, I mean, that product had been out there for a long time, and it was, there's tons of stuff that you can do from a creativity point of view and that's when you become so customer focused in terms of what can you do that's going to really get them excited, and there's still lots of things that you can do that gets them really excited.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things along those lines that Siebel did a good job of was, even after they had brought to market a tremendous amount of functionality, one of the things they turned to was how do we make the deployment experience better for customers. Yeah. So it's not even always about the features in and of itself. It's really looking at the whole ecosystem around your products and how do you continue to involve some of those things, which can be equally as exciting.
I see a business school case being written about this. How about a question out here? Go ahead.
So I've seen more and more companies ask for an MBA if you want to be in product marketing or product management. If you're just starting out, how do you deal with that? Because otherwise you don't get your foot in, basically, if you don't have MBA.
Let me dive in. I don't think you need an MBA to be in product management. However, in a climate where there may be lots of applicants, it's certainly an easy thing to ask for. The thing I think is really valuable, though, about having done one is you get a good breadth of experience. You've done the American Airlines case, and you think you know something about airlines. You've studied a lot of stuff, and I think it's a good broadening so that you're thinking about more corners of the problem. Could you have learned it any place else? Sure. I'd editorialize for a second here, and I'd say I'd love to hire an MBA for a product management slot of mine, but I'd never hire one who's just graduated, because they need about 2 years for their head to come back to normal size.
But there's some other paths. Yeah. So, when I was working with Kathy on these hires, I was faced with a really, really tough problem, which is how do I find a experienced product manager who really understands vertical domain? Because first, finding good product managers is hard. Finding domain experts is hard. So one of the paths, and it's not a direct path, but it's if you can gain that domain expertise, if you have that customer understanding, maybe it's through a consulting role. Maybe if you're an engineer, the next role is a pre-sales engineer, so that you're applying your technical skills into the selling process, you gain that domain expertise, and now you're in a position to say, I really understand this problem, and I understand engineering, and maybe I don't have an MBA, but how many MBAs actually understand the problem we're solving? So I think that customer experience set, in some way, shape, or form, can be just a tremendous bridge into product management.
And I think there's, like Dave said, there's multiple paths that you can take to get there. And if you look at the customer being the center, there's a lot of different functions that touch the customer. And if you can get that kind of experience and then look to the product marketing organization to start to learn the process or how to do things, use those types of people as a mentor. And I don't have an MBA, and the path that I took was through customer programs into beta program management, which was a piece of the product marketing, product management organization, and then extended into the product marketing organization from there. And have managed to take that on the road.
Back there in the white sweater.
Yeah, one of the questions that I have is how do you handle the trend of the engineering more and more, especially in software, being outsourced to someplace, within your company, to someplace like India? And what challenges, have you had that experience of working with a team, an engineering team in someplace, India, China, wherever? What were the greatest challenges, and how did you overcome them?
So I've done India and Costa Rica, and then little bits of Europe and in Russia. This is bigger than just a product management issue. This is a whole company issue. So you have to make some really hardcore decisions. At one company, we had the first level, the engineering design team locally. So it was a very small team, and we worked to refine the product requirements to the initial design, so that what was being then transitioned between this team and the offshore organization was highly refined. It was about execution at that point in time. So a lot of it depends on where the cut line is going to be between the market requirement and the implementation.
Yeah, actually, there's a great chart that the Harvard Business Review actually put out on how you decide what you're going to outsource versus what you're not going to outsource, and there's some key differentiators. I mean, you're not going to outsource things that are brand new. Usually, you're going to outsource things that, in fact, that have been in existence for a while. So there's a lot of risk. What you have to really do is look at it from a risk point of view. And as Dave said, it's really a company-wide decision. It isn't just product management, and how you manage it is very different.
Yeah, and what Rita said is absolutely true. I've not been associated with let's just go dump everything offshore. Yeah. We start with QA and support, and so they can get to know the product. Then goes maintenance engineering to make sure that the products are maintained and they learn the base of the products. And it's typically an evolution, even if it's at an accelerated pace. But it's an evolution, because if they don't have that core competency, it's not just about someone coding. I mean, again, like marketing, engineering is not that simple.
We have time for one more question, but I think some of the speakers might stick around. Right back here? Okay.
The question is directly related to Rich's comment about committing feature at a customer side.
It's never happened.
Well, in a startup, you hardly have luxury to say no to customers, right? And the question is, I'm sure there's no perfect solution, but what is the strategy to balance the priorities between things that are pulling immediate deals to be closed within the quarter versus a strategic thing going on, which is going on for like the next 2 quarters, and how do you manage derailing your engineering team off of one track, getting them through?
Sure. Let me very briefly answer both questions separately. I don't know if any of you have spent any time in Japan, but the Japanese have 100 ways of not saying no, but saying no. And, that feature would be very difficult to implement, and I really need to go check and see how many resources it's going to take. There's 100 ways to signal to the customer that you're taking them very, very, very seriously, but they didn't get yes out of your mouth. I think that the broader question is, how do you prioritize the short and the long term?
I think your answer is exactly right. There's a book that I read years ago. I was at a bookstore. It was like a secondhand kind of bookstore. I saw this thing, and it caught my eye. The title, and just being politically correct, I can't describe it. The first word in the title, as my son would say, was the mother of all swear words. Okay, and the second word was yes. Okay, so you put those two together, and the entire book. And it's the most bizarre book you'll ever read, was that yes is always an acceptable answer. So one of the things that I think a product manager has to learn is to say, absolutely we can do that. There is nothing worse than being with a sales guy and saying no. No is never an acceptable answer for a product manager. Yes is always the right answer. Learn that one and you will be successful. Yes does not mean, yes, we will do this in Q2. Yes means, absolutely we can do this for you. Let's talk about that. Okay? Are you prepared to sign the purchase order? If you're prepared to sign that purchase order, I think we can find a way to get it done. I mean, there's 100 ways. I'm not saying that's always the right answer, but yes is always the right answer. You have to learn how to say yes the right way if you're going to be successful in this role.
Right, and often the yes is, yes, let's spend a couple of minutes on the whiteboard figuring out exactly why you need this thing, and I might just happen to have in my pocket the feature we actually did that solves your problem. 30 seconds, I'll close that thing. I think the short and the long term is a really hard trade-off, and you better be thinking with the team about whether you have enough revenue to get to the long term, and whether the one customer you're talking about is big enough to really float your company, or you've left all your other customers on the side of the road, and you've traded off this quarter for, death next quarter. You got to run the numbers, and the salespeople know the answer.
So a big thank you to our